And we're back.
Hi again.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm here. Hello again. Hello, Chris again.
Hello, Rabbi, again.
Yes, Chris. All right. How are you getting along in this time, Chris?
Wonderfully. It hasn't changed too much of my regular routine. I'm still going to work.
Uh-huh.
How about you, Rabbi?
Hanging in there. Doing okay. You know, most of my time I spend either at home in my office anyway, so it's not as if so much has changed for me, at least, you know, relative to, you know, how this affects most people.
But now you are at home or you are at the synagogue?
Right now I'm at the synagogue.
Oh.
It's much more practical for me to do my classes from my office at the synagogue. Our apartment and where the computer is set up in our apartment, it's just, you know, it's a little bit crazy, particularly when my wife and son are around, and
Yeah.
it's just, it's not so convenient for me, and it's distracting with, you know, whatever else might be going on in the apartment. I can't just shut that out. But my office, it's perfect, you know, because absolutely nothing is going on for blocks around me. So
You're not too far from the synagogue anyway.
that's correct.
Yeah.
It took me approximately 90 seconds to get here this morning.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, so we'll wait just for another minute or two, and I'm going to suggest that you pull up the the study sheet from our last session on March 29th. And that session,
Lesson
I'm
9.
sorry, yeah, the handout for March 22nd.
Yeah, I think I have that.
Right? And that handout says at the top, lesson 9, basic concept in Kabbalah, the Sfirot, perceiving God, part 1.
Yeah,
If
that's
you
the
take
one.
that and you'll scroll past the diagram on the second page with the Sfirot on it, and then scroll all the way down to text number 6 on page 4. Right?
Yeah.
Oh, are we going to need part 2 today?
Yes, because I'm just going to skim through these last 2 texts.
All right, I got to
We'll
go
get
print that.
into the next one. Okay. So, this is from this teaching here is from Moshe DeLeon, who was one of the authors of the Zohar itself, but this is a separate, more theoretical Kabbalistic book. And he uses the metaphor of a chain for the Sfirot. It's just, the Sfirot are the chain that comes down from the Ein Sof. So, the link between the Ein Sof and everything else in creation is very real, right? But, you're never really separated from the Ein Sof, but you connect with everything else in creation wherever you connect. And then text number 7 from Pardes Rimonim, from Moshe Cordovero, one of the key teachers of Kabbalah in 16th century Tzfat, where he gives you this wonderful image. Look at the second paragraph. And this is really about understanding how the Sfirot appear to us. He says, imagine water flowing through different vessels. And the vessels all have different colors. You pour water into those vessels, and water doesn't have color, but it looks like the color of the vessel. It's just our perception of it. And that's how it is for Sfirot. Right? Sfirot appear to have a certain color, appear to have certain characteristics. But it's really just, the vessel that has a color, and not the Sfirot itself. And he also gives you this wonderful image of a stained glass window, right? And sunlight goes through there. Sunlight is just sunlight, but it looks different when it passes through different colors of glass. It seems different, but the light has not really changed. Same thing with Sfirot. We experience Sfirot in different ways, but that's not really how they are.
No, it's also the wrong one.
What, Lou?
No, I'm talking to myself. I printed part 1 again and not part 2, and the printer's downstairs, so I'll just kind of wing it.
So you just have to flip back and forth. Sorry about that. There were many mystics, many Kabbalists who would visualize a particular color to represent the Sphira. If they had a meditation that was intended to evoke a particular Sphira, well, they would do that in part by visualizing something with a particular color. you can't visualize the Sfirot themselves. It just, that's too abstract. Doesn't work so well. But with a little bit of a hook like this, with the color, that helps to bridge the gap. And it also could help to induce a different state of consciousness for the mystic. Sometimes the visualization would involve letter combination. So that was a whole different trick that they used, but really evoking the same kind of paranormal state in which you could have some appreciation of that. So now, if you go into the text for today, which begin chapter 10, right? These are the Sfirot, Perceiving God, part 2. So, sometimes the divine names themselves would be associated with different colors. So you would see, different angels associated with different roles. And so here in text number 1, from the section of the Zohar called Sitrei Torah, the secrets of the Torah, I won't read through the whole thing, but it associates Michael and Gabriel and Raphael with the colors white and red and green. The colors, it says, that you need for the rainbow. It says, this is the appearance of the Shekhinah in these colors. All 3 angels were needed. You needed one to heal Abraham after his circumcision, one to convey the message to Sarah that she would have a son, and one to destroy the city of Sodom. All of this based on the idea that the 3 angels who came to visit Abraham each had their own specific mission, and these were their missions. And so the text says they all fulfill their mission, each one doing what is required. That's the task. They're associated white, red, and green with the 3 central Sfirot, Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet. The rainbow is code language for Shekhinah at the bottom of the 10 Sfirot. So when it says the rainbow appears with only 3 colors, it's a way of saying that the 3 Sfirot influence the Shekhinah through which all of this enters the world. The right side, Gevura, Chesed, is white. The left side, Gevura, judgment, is red. And then Tiferet is harmony between those 2, and that's green. Green is a color of harmony. And it's also the color linked to the angel of healing, Raphael. Raphael means God has healed. Michael is the angel who's the highest ranking of these, so he comes from Chesed, right? The highest of those 3 wrote, and he's the messenger of the good news that Sarah will bear Abraham a son. Chesed is also the Sfirah most closely associated with Abraham. Right? Gabriel means God is my strength. It comes from Gevurah, from Din, from judgment. He's a messenger of judgment, right? He's the one who says Sodom is going down. So he's also kind of a partner with the angel of death. you don't really want to be a partner of the angel of death, but I guess if you're Gabriel the angel, you know, you can handle that. But in this view, when the body dies, Gabriel takes the higher aspect of the soul. The angel of death claims the lower part of the soul, etc. Right? So a few comments here and on, you know, in general, what texts like this are telling us. Mainline Kabbalah, like every form of mysticism, is trying to help us reduce the gap between God and man. It's not usually about the kind of, you know, having an ecstatic state when you get there, but sometimes you like having that, right? You want to feel not just that you're doing something for God, but having a state of ecstasy makes you feel like it's really happening. It's there for you too, right? It's because if you think you have that much closeness with God, you would feel an effect from that. No, it isn't just that it would help God fulfill his purposes, but this way you would know that it's for real. So there are mystical meditations even in mainline Kabbalah, which include this kind of ecstatic experience. And the next text is one that's very much about that. It has to do with a very deliberate and mindful practice of what's called a unification, a yichud, a unification of God's name. Lou, you had a question.
Yeah, coming back to the rainbow and the colors. I can understand using white. As we know, all of the the visual spectrum is white light, but we don't see white in the rainbow. We see green, we see red, and particularly blue. I'm a bit surprised that blue isn't used here instead of maybe white. Mm-hmm. Any explanation for that?
Well, it's just not one. This text is specifically about 3 sfirot associated with those 3 colors. Blue is associated with, other sfirot, but not these 3.
Okay.
Right? Deborah, you had a question.
Oh, thank you. I'm learning my way around this technology. I just wanted to understand if the sefirot, the aura, is another way of associating with the Shekhinah, the color. I've heard the expression aura in different colors, and it's supposed to depict a person's state of mind. Is that the same thing?
Could be, at least in the individual's perception, right? Now, what you experience and what you see, what you physically see, as opposed to what you internally access, are not necessarily the same, but that could be included.
Okay, thank you.
Right? Francois, you had a question. You want to unmute yourself?
Okay, so I always thought there's a good parallel between the rainbow and the Sephirah because we have one light, the white light, it consists of 6 colors of the rainbow, and we have the Sephirah beside the Keter and the Wiz and the Chachma and the Bina. We have 6 Sephirat, and then we have the last one, the Shekhinah.
Shekhinah.
Okay, so so that said, I was wondering if there's a relationship, you know, in kind of in the colors, okay, if all the colors are actually defined as well as the color of the rainbow as specific Sephirat, and that's it.
So if I understand your question, it is there a specific connection between all the colors of the rainbow and other Sefirot?
Correct.
Okay, so the broad answer is it sort of depends on the text, right? In other words, there are different models of Kabbalah. Most of them, to the best of my knowledge, and this is not an area where I have great expertise, but, you know, in my knowledge of Kabbalistic texts is a little bit limited because there's so many of them to look at. However, you know, some of them are pretty common. Like these three being associated with Chesed, Gevura, and Tiferet. There might be exceptions, but I think they're pretty common to most of the Sefirot. But I don't know if if all the connections between colors and Sefirot are the same in every Kabbalistic model. Does that answer your question, Francois?
Halfway, that's fine.
I know it's not that helpful because a lot of the answer is, I don't know.
Wow, okay.
Right? In the end, I think it's you know, unless you wanted to do specific meditation in a Kabbalistic fashion, I don't know how anxious any of you are to get to that, right? Unless you wanted to do that kind of meditation, you might need medication after that. You probably don't need to know. Okay? All right. Other comments or questions before we go on? All right. So now we're up to text number 2. So this is from the Zohar, which means it's being written 12 centuries after the destruction of the temple. But it's about what happened in the temple when the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, went into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur to recite the 4-letter name of God in its secret pronunciation, right? Very important ritual in its time because that's how people got forgiveness for their sins. So, you know, in Kabbalah, you know, just looking way backwards at this ritual, you know, it's great to have a way to undo sin because sin is what messes up the cosmic realms, right? Especially sin messes up that central relationship between Tiferet and Shechina. Right? And if you go back and look at the diagram of the Sefirot, and you see that connection between Tiferet right in the middle and Shechina at the bottom, Tiferet representing the masculine, Shechina representing the feminine, you want to have a clear channel between those two because when they connect directly, without any interposition between them, everything in the world is groovy. Everything is good. When things are, you know, gunked up in between, that's because of sin, right? So if this whole ritual works on Yom Kippur in the time of the temple, right? That's a really important way to sustain this cosmic exchange, right? Through which the flow of God's goodness descends into the world, right? We're going to talk a lot more about sin next year. For the time being, I'll just tell you, don't do it, right? No sin, okay? Thank you, right? But in Kabbalah, the significance of sin, very important. We'll come to that next year, right? So the Zohar gives a particular interpretation of the Yom Kippur experience in the temple. I'm going to tell you right now that since Kabbalah didn't exist in the 2nd century, there's no way that this is accurate historically. There's no way that the Kohen Gadol actually did the things that are described here. That said, this is, something that the process of Midrash often does, which is to add a new layer of meaning to rituals that have already been in existence, right? So even though this ritual was no longer performed, had not been performed for well over 1,000 years, in the time when the Zohar is written, it was a way to make sense out of the ritual for Kabbalists in this period. So it presumes that the 4 letters of God's name, the name that the Kohen Gadol is going to recite in the Holy of Holies, these 4 letters represent the 10 Sefirot. Right? How does that work? So let me do it from bottom to top, okay? If you want to take a moment and look at that diagram of the Sefirot, okay? If you flip back to that, you have Shekhinah at the bottom. The last letter of God's name is Hey, right? The letter Hey is open at the bottom. And so that is taken to represent the feminine Sefirah of Malchut or Shekhinah, okay? The next letter before that last Hey in God's name is the letter Vav. Remember, Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, okay? So going backwards, the Vav is the 6th letter of the Aleph Bet. So Vav represents 6. And so that is taken to represent the 6 Sefirot in the middle of this diagram. The 6 of the 10 Sefirot that are in the middle, centering with Tiferet, right? Tiferet is at the middle of those 6. Going backwards, Hey, Vav, Hey, again, the next preceding letter represents another feminine Sefirah, which is Bina. Again, Hey has an opening at the bottom. So that is taken as a model for the female form. Okay? So it's associated with Bina. And then the first letter of the Yud Hey Vav Hey, the letter Yud, that is taken to represent Chochmah, okay? The second Sefirah. Where does Keter come in? Well, Keter is represented by the tiny little jot at the top of the Yud. You know how a Yud is written in a Sefer Torah? It has just a tiny, tiny little crown at the top of the Yud. You can barely see it. That's Keter, right? Which is, after all, not very accessible. Not accessible at all, really. So that's where Keter fits in to the diagram of the Yud Hey Vav Hey. So now, taking it backwards, you have the jot at the top of the yud for keter. The yud itself is chokhmah. The hey, the first hey in the name, represents bina. The vav is the 6 sfirot around Tiferet. And the bottom hey represents Shechina. When the Kohen Gadol proclaims God's 4-letter name in a mindful fashion, meaning being mindful of what the letters represent in all of this, he becomes a link for this whole Sephirotic scheme. And it connects the upper worlds in this scheme with the people below, and they then are recipients of the divine flow which comes through the system and is received by the people. So what do you think it would be like to be the conduit for that kind of ritual through which the whole people receive a certain intense beneficence from above? Well, you can probably imagine that it would, this experience would feel pretty amazing for the Kohen Gadol, right? And that's exactly the way it is. It's an experience of profound ecstasy for the Kohen Gadol. At least that's what we see in this text. The text begins by analyzing an important verse from the Torah about Yom Kippur. Right? It says, "From all your sins before the Lord, you shall be cleansed." So, the rabbis look at a verse, and anything that seems to be superfluous in a verse, they're going to ask a question about, why should that be there? And so the phrase, "before the Lord," what difference does that make in this verse? What's the difference between saying the verse as it is and just saying, "From all your sins you shall be cleansed"? Why does it have to say "before the Lord"? After all of our sins take place before the Lord, right? God knows what you're doing. Hey, God knows their sins, right? So why does it have to say that? So one of the members of the Zohar's fellowship says it means literally before the Lord, right? That is referring to one of the Zohar's many code phrases for the Sfirot. Before the Lord represents the Sfira Bina. Why? Because Tiferet and the other 5 Sfirot connected to it are associated with the whole 4-letter name. Bina comes before all those 6 Sfirot. Therefore, it is before God, literally before the Lord. So therefore, that is an expression about Bina. Okay? Bina precedes the Sfirot, which are described as symbolic of the 4-letter name of God. Okay? By the way, in all of this, Bina, one of the things that is associated with the Sfira Bina is that Bina is the source of repentance. Repentance goes way high up in the Kabbalistic scheme. And so that's a really important role connected with this ritual, which is designed to provide forgiveness to the entire Jewish people. So the key point in all of this, I'll get to you in a second, the key point is when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Holy of Holies in the temple, his soul is actually ascending into the Sefirot. That's the meaning of this text. Yes, Lou.
I'm losing something in the counting of the Sefirot and the Yud He Vav He. If Yud is Keter, and
Yud is just the jot above the,
okay,
Yud is Chochmah, but Keter is associated with the little jot above the Yud.
Okay, all right. Yud is because that's how I was going to get to Chachma. All right.
Yeah. Other questions or comments before we go on? Okay. So it says in this that the books are open and the judges sit in judgment from the beginning of the month. What? Well, what's the beginning of the month? The beginning of the month is Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the month of Tishrei. And that's the time of judgment, the 10 days from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. The judges, it doesn't say exactly what that means, but the judges are in judgment until the 9th day of the month. And then there's a verse in Leviticus 23 that says, on the 9th day of the month at evening, meaning the beginning of the 10th day, from evening to evening, you shall keep your Sabbath. And this was interpreted to mean that the preparations for judgment in the higher world were begun on the 9th of Tishrei, before Yom Kippur. The 9th of Tishrei is a feast day, right? You have a big feast before Yom Kippur, right? Right? I hope you have plenty to eat before Yom Kippur, right? So that is a day for Israel to rejoice before the Lord. Right? And the throne of mercy that is referred to here, where they have to prepare a throne of mercy, that probably represents Tiferet. It's code language for Tiferet, right? The judgment takes place before the Lord, meaning at that higher level, the level of Bina. All this is, this is even before you get to the actual experience of the Kohen Gadol. Now, the people who are outside the Holy of Holies would recite the verse that is mentioned at the beginning of this text up until the last word, the word that means you shall be cleansed. It comes from tahara, purification. Tit haru is the Hebrew word. Okay? Now that word is really only recited by the Kohen Gadol, but supposedly it's not him reciting it, it's the Sefirot speaking through him. By speaking the divine name, the Kohen Gadol becomes linked to the Sefirot. Right? So mentally, he is supposed to concentrate on the connection with Shekhinah. Through his contemplation, he mentally ascends one at a time through the Sefirot as he proceeds with each physical step of the ritual. So at each point, the physical world down below is a mirror to what's happening on the upper levels. Okay? Yes, Lou.
We can go back to the third line of the text near the end where it says the books are open and the judges sit in judgment.
Right.
Why is judges plural?
Good question, and the Zohar does not answer that. They're really very unspecific about that. It makes me sort of think of Santa's elves, right? God has little helpers, angels, if you will, who help prepare the books, prepare the judgments. It's just not, it's not very clear.
Okay.
Other comments or questions up here?
Does the Unatana Tokef come out of this?
Not directly. The Unatana Tokef was I think Rabbi Amnon of Mayans, who wrote the Unatana Tokef, lived after this was written. I don't believe he was aware of the Zohar or of necessarily of Kabbalah in general. Now, he may have been a mystic. He may have been associated with the Hasidei Ashkenaz that we talked about back in, lesson 7, I think it was. But I don't believe he's a Kabbalist or even aware of Kabbalistic teaching.
It seems like, so when you look at the map or you see like you have to go through the Sefirot so you can reach the Shekhinah, but from your conversation, it's kind of like more a reverse engineer. You have to make connection with the Shekhinah, and once you are in good position, then you start filling up
Yes,
the rest of the Sefirot.
And that's what the Kohen Gadol is doing here, all right? He's going up and mentally he ascends through each level by level, and making sure to do it in such a way as to ascertain that the channel is clear, right? So that the Shefa, the divine flow, can descend down to benefit and add to the life of the people. Okay. Other comments or questions? Deborah, I see a question in your face.
Oh, I'm getting used to playing around with this. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
I always associated the counting of the Omer with the Sefirot. I never knew it had another place. So what's the connection with counting the Omer with the different, every day is a different attribute?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it really requires a longer explanation than I'm going to give you. But basically, you take the 7 Sefirot, and each of the days of the Omer are a different combination of the Sefirot. So the first day and the first week are the lowest of the low, right? And you go up level by level. So your first week is going to be, let's say, Shekhinah, right? Or Malchut. And then you go through the 7 Sefirot. The first day would be Malchut, V'Malchut, and then Malchut, the
Yesod.
Yesod. Malchut and Yesod. And then Malchut and Hod. And then Malchut and Netzach. And so forth.
Right.
And then the second week, it starts out with Yesod. Okay? And it's Yesod v'Malchut. And then it's Yesod v'Yesod. And then it's Yesod v'Hod. And then Yesod v'Netzach, and so forth. Right? And then the third week, it begins with Hod. And so on until by the end, you're at Chesed b'Chesed. Okay? So, this is a way that the Kabbalists used to connect the 49 days of the Omer with the 49, meaning 7 times 7, combinations of the lower 7 sefirot, right? If you were to take all 10 sefirot, which, first of all, the first 3 sefirot are not comprehensible. And secondly, it doesn't match, all right? You need 7 times 7 to make 49 days, okay? So there's a very extensive ritual for the Kabbalistic recitation of each day of the Omer. So, when you would say the blessing and you would declare the number of days, you wouldn't just say the blessing and make the declaration. You would have to be mindful of the specific Kabbalistic connection with the upper realm, right? And again, that mindful connection is what helps to clear the channel and make the connection with the cosmos.
But we do that. You were saying that you associate it with before the Day of Judgment, but we do it now, and we finish at Shavuot. Finish the Chesed and the Gevurah and all those.
Day before Shavuot.
Shavuot. Okay, but those are the 2 times of the year that we think about those attributes. I don't.
Well, no. I mean, this just has a special Kabbalistic significance. And the Zohar here emphasizes the connection with Yom Kippur, but there are Kabbalistic readings for a connection with all of the festivals. So, for instance, you have the 7 days of Sukkot. So, the Sukkot ritual would also have a Kabbalistic significance, right? Actually, kind of parallel to the one noted here for the 7 weeks of the Omer. Yes, Lou?
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that, 7 days of Sukkot and 7 days of Pesach, and also 10 days, Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. Are they Kabbalistically related to the 10 Sefirot?
The short answer to that is yes. The long answer I'm not prepared to get into. But if you read enough Kabbalistic texts, you will find rituals relating the 10 Sefirot to virtually every Jewish ritual in existence at that time. Now, I mentioned Sukkot. So let me give you an example of that. I suspect that most of you are familiar with the ritual of Ushpizin. Okay? Ushpizin is the ritual by which we invite guests to the Sukkah, but not just any guests. We invite the patriarchs. We invite Moses and Aaron, and we invite Joseph, and we invite King David, right? So, these are important guests, and we invite one of them on each of the 7 days of Sukkot. Well, you already know that Abraham is connected to the Sefirah of Chesed, right? And so, when we talk about the invitation for Ushpizin, we should have a specific intention as we declare that we are inviting Abraham, that we are, forming a connection with the Sefirah of Chesed, that we direct our intention to Chesed. Okay? Interestingly, in the Kabbalist, there are 2 forms of Ushpizin. One of them is Kabbalistic and one of them is non-Kabbalistic. In non-Kabbalistic Ushpizin, the invitations are given in chronological order, meaning the first day is Abraham, second day is Isaac, third day is Jacob, fourth day is Joseph, fifth day is Moses, sixth day is Aaron, seventh day is David. Okay? You could quibble about Moses and Aaron, but Moses always comes before Aaron, right? So live with that. But in the Kabbalistic Ushpizin, Joseph is switched out of chronological order into the sixth Sphira, or rather the sixth of the seven Sphirot, into the Sphira of Yesod. So Joseph is the one who is invited on the sixth day of Sukkot. Why does Joseph get connected with Yesod? Pause. Yesod has to do with sexuality, right? And Joseph is the master of restraint in matters of sexuality because he was able to withstand temptation with Potiphar's wife, right? So that's how Joseph gets reworked out of chronological order in the Kabbalistic scheme of things. Okay? That's a good example of how Kabbalah has its effect with different Jewish holidays and Jewish rituals. When we get to Jewish prayer next year, I'll give you some other examples relating to Shabbat and festivals. Okay? Okay, so now you see the section where it says, you know, there are 3 rows formed by his brothers, the Kohanim, the Levites, and all the people surrounding the Kohen Gadol. And they all blessed him and raised their hands over him in prayer. There's this golden thread attached to his leg. And why is that, by the way? Right? Because, you know, if he dies while he's in the Holy of Holies, which, by the way, that's, you know, this is a serious moment. You know, you don't want to stand before God without being in purity. But, you know, if you're not, it's very likely you're going to get zapped, right? And so they would attach this string to the Kohen Gadol just in case he got zapped and they had to pull him out without going in to the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. And if he makes a mistake in the ritual, right, that's also really bad. And he also will get zapped for that, right? And then they don't have to go into the sacred precinct, right? But everybody is praying for him because the stakes in this are really high, right? Because we have, you know, this is how we deal with the problem of sin. Yom Kippur and the ritual in the temple in ancient times are a way of maintaining the connection with God that sin interrupts. Right? So now the Kohen Gadol takes 3 sets of 3 steps which, he should take all the way to the top of the scheme of the Sphirot. He attaches himself to the world on high, right? Meaning to the upper levels of the Sphirot, right? And he enters the Holy of Holies where he hears the wings of the cherubim, right? Which now we saw before when we looked back in lesson 5 on the temple, we saw a little bit about the erotic connection with the cherubim, right? And that's carried out here as well. They symbolize the mating of Tiferet and Shekhinah, right? The one above the other, right? which, as we know, that has a very important effect on the whole Kabbalistic system. So if everything works, then there is rejoicing on high, right? And then there is this beam of divine light, which comes forth, this illumination, expressing acceptance. In other words, everything worked, that, you know, the prayers of the Kohen Gadol are accepted, and his heart is made tranquil, meaning after he's had this ecstatic experience, he sort of comes back to earth. And since it worked, then no accuser can succeed. There's no negative force that can harm the Jewish people and accuse them of sin, because all their sins have been wiped away, right? He completes his ritual, you know, completes the way of getting forgiveness by linking with the supernal realms. So the Zohar looks at this as a very mindful meditation, but also a very deliberate experience, and a very ecstatic experience as well, right? You do have to remember that this is kind of a 13th century invention and not the way it really happened in the 2nd century. Yes, Lou. In the 1st century, in the time of the temple.
You answered my question, which a little bit more specifically was not written, or there's no documentation of this particular ritual and the sets of 3 steps until the Zohar?
Absolutely not. There is no documentation of anything like this relating to the temple period, or even close to the temple period. Like, you know, the sages of the 2nd century and the 3rd century, the people that we're talking about in Pirkei Avot, right? There's nothing that they taught that connects to anything like this, right?
Okay.
Now, I mean, the basics of the ritual of the Kohen Gadol, those certainly existed. That, you know, the Kohen Gadol went into the Holy of Holies, recited the name of God. All the Kabbalistic stuff is an add-on to that from the Zohar. Yes, Anne? Anne, you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So how much detail did they go into without doing any Kabbalah, but some other thing that they did to describe what happened on Yom Kippur in the temple?
Yes. Well, you know, you come to synagogue on Yom Kippur and you follow the Musaf service.
It tells.
You know basically as much as I know about that, right? That's really a summary of the entire ritual. There are a few other details, but really nothing that significant. If you read the Avodah service in the Machzor for Yom Kippur, the stuff that we do during Musaf, that tells you basically
But I
what
read
happened
somewhere,
and how it was thought of in the time of the rabbis.
I read that he had to stay up all night preparing and learning and studying to get ready for
Yes.
all this.
Yes, which from a mystical standpoint, that would, you know, the combination of that with the awe of the experience of going into the Holy of Holies would definitely lend itself to a paranormal experience for the Kohen Gadol. All the Kabbalistic details didn't exist in that time, but yeah, you would expect that it would lead to, and certainly could lead to, an extremely significant mystical experience for the Kohen Gadol.
But they bought the office of Kohen Gadol in Roman times.
Ah, yes. the corruption of the religious leadership. That said, there probably were some of the Kohanim Gedolim who were actually righteous people and who took the ritual very seriously. And even if you didn't, if you did all the things that they describe, and you stayed up all night and the sages read to you, or you, if you were learned, you did the study yourself, right? And you know, like Shavuot, when we supposedly we stay up all night studying Torah. I mean, at my age, I'm past that actually, but you know, that's the theory. So the Kohen Gadol did that on Yom Kippur also. So if you did that, and if you had that experience, it did lend itself to something out of the ordinary. And who knows, might have converted some of those people to an appreciation of Jewish ritual and of the connection with God that was intended to take place on that day. Other questions or comments here? Well, let me say a couple more words because we just have a few minutes here. I've made a point several times of saying this is a 13th century text and not a text from the time of the temple. And that is significant for another reason, which is that this is kind of a response to some of the other currents in Jewish thought that were in vogue in that time. Who are those people? They are philosophers, right? Now, what did the philosophers believe about the temple ritual? They believed that the sacrifices that took place in the temple were only required then as part of the training of early Israelites. And what that meant was that you could imply a certain relativization of mitzvot, meaning that, you know, maybe the mitzvot don't have, you know, the same meaning today that they used to. If you don't, you know, if sacrifices were only brought because that was a concession to ancient human beings, then maybe I could apply that in the same way to other rituals that I don't find meaningful in the 13th century, right? So the Zohar is saying, you can't do that. This ritual has a powerful effect on the cosmos. You have to do it. It has to be done with the right intentions, because only in that way can they bring about the right results in the sphirot, in the cosmic scheme. And then, you know, why do Kabbalistic texts use code language for the different sphirot? Well, you know, there was still a certain amount of reluctance to let just anyone study Kabbalah. Even though the Kabbalists believed in somewhat wider access to the wisdom of Kabbalah, they didn't want to make it simple for the unlearned to do that. Also, certain names for the Sphirot were kind of like intimate names, right? It's like, you know, if I have a nickname for my spouse, which I only use at the most intimate moments, right? Now, you know, I would never call my spouse that name in public, right? That would only be you know, for the bedroom. So same thing here. The Sphirot and the actual names of the Sphirot are intimately beloved to those who know them. So next week, we'll come to angels in the Sfirot and what the Zohar had to say about them. Hope all of you will join me again next week. Yeah, Francois, you have a question before we go?
Okay, so it's really, when we do Yom Kippur service, we need to make sure that people who are actually doing the ritual are very connected, so we can have a better.
Right. In other words, in this view, the Kohen Gadol could not be a total ignoramus, right? He might not be the most learned, but he's got to at least know a minimum about Kabbalah,
Right.
because otherwise, how can he have the proper intentions? Okay? So even though you and I know that it never happened this way, in the view of the Zohar, that was who the Kohen Gadol had to be a mystic. Had to
Makes
be
sense.
at least minimally knowledgeable in Kabbalah.
And so those names of the Sefirot are not the name that we know. They are not the actual names of the Sefirot. They are just concealed names, or not concealed.
Right. So, for instance, commonly the Zohar uses the term Knesset Yisrael, the Assembly of Israel, to refer to the Sfirah of Malchut, of Shekhinah. Okay? It never uses the word Malchut. Right? It rarely uses rarely is too strong a word. Infrequently, it uses the term Shekhinah as a direct reference for the 10th Sfirah.
Okay.
Those are code names. So that's one reason why code names creep in to Kabbalistic discussions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank
Wish
you,
you a good
Rabbi.
week.
Thank you. You too. Goodbye.
Shavua tov.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, let me see. Yes.